What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Packers Preview, presented by Microsoft Surface. I am Wes Hodkowitz, joined alongside my colleague at Packers.com, Mike Spofford, here to preview. Yep, we're back again. Here to preview the Green Bay Packers Thursday Night Football matchup with the Detroit Lions, a game that can be viewed on Amazon Prime. I believe, what is it, Michael? 7:15 local start time.
7:15 Central Time, yes.
Each one of them is like a little bit different.
There's
7:15,
like
7:20, 7:30,
7:30, yeah.
7:23. Be that as it may, Mike and I are here for the next 10 to 15 minutes. Probably end up being 20, though, because we just want to keep Matt Donnelly here longer, answering all of your questions on YouTube, Facebook, and X. Be sure to submit those there. Our social team will submit those over to me, and I will submit them into Mike Spofford's cranium. But before we get into that, Mike, let's talk quickly about the injuries. A little bit different than our usual Friday setup where we actually get the designations. We only have the injury report. When you look at the Detroit Lions, as far as length is concerned, it's shorter than the Packers. But when you bring in the context of it, they already have 18 guys on injured reserve to begin with, including Alex Anzalone, who's been, and again, as I've said routinely, one of the more underrated linebackers in this league, in my opinion.
For sure.
And their defensive line's banged up. Taylor Decker was a DMP again today. A lot going on there for the Lions. Packers side of things, pretty much the same as what it's been all week. Elton Jenkins did return to practice today, was listed with a knee injury yesterday when he was a DMP. Jair Alexander, Romeo Doubs, both practicing. Matt LaFleur said Romeo's still going through the concussion protocol. Edgerrin Cooper and Corey Ballentine did not practice. A lot of names, Michael. I'll just throw it up there for you. What do you make of it from what we've seen through the first two official injury reports?
Yeah, well, you said it. As far as the Lions, we'll take them first. I don't know what the exact number is, but over the last, couple 3 weeks, it seems like they've been putting a new linebacker on their injured reserve list, every other day or something like that. Their linebacking core has had to be almost completely revamped, and then now they are also dealing with very iffy status with some of the guys on the defensive line, the guys who have been the mainstays up there since Aiden Hutchinson went on injured reserve a long time ago, before the Packers even played the Lions the first time. So Detroit definitely dealing with a lot there, and as you said, on the offensive side, Taylor Decker is the one injury to keep an eye on there at left tackle. If he can't go, it'll be Dan Skipper, who's sort of been their sixth man on the O-line, and their skipper. But on the Packers side, Romeo Doubs has roughly about 48 hours from now to hopefully get cleared through the concussion protocol so that he will be able to play. We will see what happens with Jair Alexander. Sounds like the Packers are going to give him every opportunity to prove that he's good to go, but there is a little bit of caution there because they thought he was good to go against the Chicago Bears a few weeks ago, and then he was only able to play about 10 snaps, and it was like, nope, had to shut it down. The knee was not cooperating that particular day. So those are really probably the two biggest ones to keep an eye on. And it doesn't look like, from what we've seen so far this week, it does not look like Edgerrin Cooper will be back for this one, because he has not yet returned to the practice field. He's been out a couple weeks now with the hamstring.
With the hamstring that he aggravated in practice. Okay, we'll start off on YouTube. This question is from Wyatt Gilbert. And the question is, what's the key to continuing the dominance in the run game against the Lions and the over-under on rushing attempts for Josh Jacobs?
The over-under on rushing attempts. Well, gambling remains illegal at Bushwood, but I would be surprised, quite frankly, if Josh Jacobs doesn't get at least 20 carries in this game. I think the Packers are going to try to feature him, especially if the Lions are as banged up on the defensive line as they appear to be, and with the new linebackers in there. I think the Packers are going to try to force the Lions to stop Josh Jacobs. And from what we've heard from Jacobs, he's ready for whatever workload comes his way.
He
right?
reiterated it today in locker room. It does
not
matter.
He is not going to back down. I know Matt LaFleur said that Jacobs is pretty honest with them about, maybe when he needs a breather, when he doesn't. I think that's more on the practice side of things, not so much the game side of things, because I don't see Josh Jacobs looking Matt LaFleur in the eye and saying, no, I'm good. I'm going to sit this one out. That's not the kind of player he is. So I do think he's a huge part of this game, and it'll be interesting to see, with as many injuries as the Lions have in that defensive front, if they're going to be able to stop them.
Absolutely, and I feel like I wrote about it. You had to edit it for the Insider Inbox this week. I know it looks really good on paper for Detroit with their rushing defense, but if you look at the average yards per carry, there is some wiggle room there. I think what's happened in a lot of these games is teams just get completely taken out of the run game because they're playing from behind and having to turn to the pass.
Yep.
If you can actually establish the run early, I think that's one of the first dominoes that has to fall en route to finally being able to solve the puzzle that is the Detroit Lions.
Yeah, the Lions have had several games this year, including on Thanksgiving just last week, where they built multi-score leads in the first half, and then they don't really have to worry about stopping the run in the second half. If the Packers are still able to use Josh Jacobs for all 4 quarters in this game because of the situation and where the game lies, that's a good sign for Green Bay.
This is funny on X. Eris, I hope I pronounced your name right. 3:15 a.m. is not prime time here in Greece.
No, that is not.
Respect. He does say go
Yeah.
Pack go, though. Absolutely. It should be a fun one there for the Packers. And if you're
3:15 kickoff. That's right where you don't even know, like, do you just stay up or do you actually go to bed and set an alarm?
I've talked to some friends of mine out in Europe that are continually having to make these decisions. And it sounds like a lot of times people will structure their day where it is the beginning of the day.
Okay.
So it's like I don't know if you go to bed early
You
or go to the
try
night
to get
before.
to bed early and then set the alarm and get up and be ready for kickoff.
Football,
Yeah.
and then potentially going to work at 7, 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
Pat on YouTube. Packers lead Detroit with a win, Mike. If they do what?
There's a lot that the Packers need to do. A lot of times you can boil it down to like 1 or 2 keys to victory. When you're playing a team that's 11-1 and you're going into their building, the list of things you need to do and do well is pretty long. The good news is a lot of it is, in my mind, is things that the Packers have already been doing pretty well. They have been reducing the turnovers. They have been reducing the drop passes. They have been way more efficient in the red zone of late compared to the first time against Detroit. The other thing I would add to this then is to get the penalties back down. You know, the defensive offsides, lining up offside, jumping offside, the false starts on offense. Those are the things the Packers have complete and total control over. Opponents will force you into making mistakes. Miscues happen in this game because the other guys get paid too. But the ones you have complete control over yourself, you've got to limit, if not eliminate, those kind of mistakes in order to beat a team that is sitting on top of the league right now.
And I said it on I almost said Insider Inbox. On Packers Unscripted earlier today. Sorry. It's been a long day. I have a massive car payment now because of my trip to the mechanic this morning. Pass the hat for Hod. It's been a Wednesday / football. No, it's Tuesday. I'm done. I'm gonna just sign off for the rest of the day. Football Friday. We'll just stick with Football Friday.
Football Friday.
Anyway, when we were shooting Unscripted this morning, I had said one of my big keys to victory for this thing is Detroit is so good situationally.
Yeah.
They are incredible inside the red zone on offense. They are incredible in third downs, and they're even better defensively in those areas.
those categories,
I
yeah.
mean, they are suffocating. The Detroit Lions will produce yards, and they will give up some yards too. But they get takeaways. They have, the second or third most interceptions in the league right now as a team, half of those belonging to Kirby Joseph.
Yeah.
And then they just shut teams down. They prevent you from getting inside their end zone. And that difference, Mike, that 3 to 7 point difference, when you do that over 4 quarters, it has a significant impact in a football game.
Yeah, it's really interesting it's a great point you make about how Detroit is built and how they win the key situations in games. And that is if you're going to point to one thing, that is probably the key reason that the Detroit Lions are 11-1. What I'm really curious about in this game is their defense, because if you look at the last chunk of games they've had since they beat the Packers here at Lambeau Field, their defense had a rough first half in Houston. Then they shut out the Texans in the second half to come back and win that game. They played 2 AFC South teams, did not allow a touchdown, allowed 6 points, 2 field goals in each game. And then they shut down the Bears in the first half on Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden in the second half, Caleb Williams gets it going and the Bears score 3 touchdowns and we're in position for more points to potentially send that game to overtime last Thursday. Detroit's defense went the equivalent of 3 full games, 12 quarters. They gave up 12 points.
Yep.
But yet their most recent is that second half against Chicago when they were banged up and Caleb Williams got it going, and it was 3 touchdowns in one half of play all of a sudden. how Detroit's defense performs in this game to me is the absolute X factor in terms of how this game is going to unfold.
It's a great point you make there. Andrew Ford on Facebook. Have a great day and evening. Hello from Columbus, Indiana. Go Pack Go. Andrew, same to you. Again, if you want to submit those questions, he's Mike Spofford. I think I'm still Wes Hodkowitz. You can do those over at YouTube, Facebook, and X. This question comes from X. Actually, yeah, it is a question. David Niebauer. What's your go-to drink if you have to get up at 2:15 a.m. to watch the game? That's more of a question for Eris, if he or she, I'm not sure. If they're still here, maybe they can answer that. I don't know. What would you do if you had to wake up at 2:15? You're not a coffee drinker.
No,
You'd
I'm
be
not
drinking a lot of cappuccino.
No, I'm not a coffee drinker. Yeah,
I'd be on nitro.
I'd be whipping up some. I'd be whipping up some of my instant cappuccino because that's about the only like caffeinated thing that I ever drink.
Is cappuccino caffeinated?
I think. Well, it's got a lot of sugar in it. So I mean that helps get you going. So.
Whatever it takes, right?
That's right.
Okay, this one is from Terry on YouTube. I don't know if I have the answer to this. Maybe you have one. What restaurant are you looking forward to dining at in Detroit? Well, unfortunately, we don't stay in Detroit. We stay in a suburb of Detroit.
Yeah, we're quite a ways from actual Detroit when we stay
So over in Ann Arbor.
Yeah.
Couple things really quickly. I am going to go to dinner. I'm going to dinner with Tim Van Voren from Milwaukee TV
all right.
and Craig Schilbauer. Couldn't tell you the name of the restaurant. I went there last year, and I don't know the name of the restaurant. I think it was like Marnaca's or something like that. I don't know. It was good, Italian restaurant.
Okay.
So I don't know if
Italian.
you're doing anything. There's a Fuga de Ciao across, I think, somewhere in our area.
I'll see.
Yeah, figure something out. Okay, this question I think is from Olivia. Is there always a higher chance that the home team, Lions, wins simply because they're playing at home, or is that a myth? And you guys think we will be fine? ? Well, if you go off last year, and if you go off really the last 10 years, Packers have had some really emotional, huge victories at Ford Field. I always go back to 2015. It was my last year at the Green Bay Press-Gazette. Mike Spofford still doing his thing at the Packers at that point. Thursday Night Football, by the way, did not realize that. Tom Fanning was the one that actually mentioned that this week at practice.
Yeah, and I actually am mentioning that in my One Last Look column tomorrow, that the last time the Packers played the Thanksgiving game followed by the Thursday night game the following week, that Thursday night game was at Detroit, and it became the Miracle in Motown, the Hail Mary to Rodgers and the Packers win. Yeah, it was basically 9 years ago this week.
I can't believe that. Yeah. And it was one of the most emotional nights I think I've ever had as a writer, because I was the main #1 beat guy at the Green Bay Press-Gazette at the time, and I was responsible for the gamer. And we still had a print deadline of 11 o'clock at that point, and there was newspapers throughout Gannett, Wisconsin, including Manitowoc, that went a little early that needed a running game story. And I had 900 words written on how the Green Bay Packers season was at a crossroads. They barely, I think a week earlier, had gotten past the Bears. No, they lost to the Bears.
Yeah,
they lost to the Bears.
That was the Thanksgiving night game in the rain.
Yep,
Brett Favre's number was retired, and the Bears came in, and beat the Packers. At that point, the Packers had lost, I believe it was like 4 out of 5 or 4 out of 6 games or something like that. And you're right. You go to Detroit on the following Thursday night. It wasn't the thing that people don't remember about that game, because obviously the Hail Mary is what everybody does remember. The Packers were down 20-0 in that game. I mean, it was looking like the season was headed to the brink at that point. And the fact that the Packers even got themselves in a position to try a Hail Mary to win the game was a minor miracle in itself, because Detroit was absolutely dominating that contest all the way up until probably about midway through the third quarter.
So when you ask the question about how difficult it is going into an opposing team's venue, I mean, for 24 years, the Detroit Lions did not beat the Packers at Lambeau Field, and I think it's now they've won it, was it 4 out of 5 now, or 3 out of 4, something like that at Lambeau?
Like that, yeah.
The Packers got one last year on Thanksgiving. I will say this, I thought Matt LaFleur, I think it was on Sunday, had raised a salient point where he said, and I think Christian Watson maybe talked about it too in the locker room, if my memory serves. If you allow that Detroit team and those fans to get going, I mean, you feel it. Like that stadium, that dome, and that fan base, if everything's going right, it's about as loud of an environment as you're going to find in the National Football League. But what the Packers have to do is kind of like Thanksgiving last year. They got off to an incredibly fast start, and then they kind of rode it out from there. And I feel like that's really the biggest key. Whether or not there's home field advantage, disadvantage, who knows? But I think that's the biggest key in this one is being able to really jump on them the way that they did against the 49ers and the Dolphins.
Yeah, I agree with you. This is by far the most hostile environment the Packers will have encountered this year to this point, because you look at the games away from Lambeau Field so far this year. Week 1 was in Brazil, kind of a 50-50 crowd.
Correct.
And then the first 3 true road games, which were Tennessee, LA, and Jacksonville, those were all basically like pro-Packers crowds.
Right.
Because
Adam
Packers
Stenavich said that. Yeah.
Packers fans took over those places. The game in Chicago was the first real hostile environment the Packers faced. There were some Packers fans. There weren't nearly as many as there had been in some of those other stadiums, but the Packers handled the noise and everything at Soldier Field pretty well. This is going to be a whole different ball game because it's Detroit. They're the first place team. They're 11-1. They are inside, so the noise is just that much greater. What the Packers have going for them is when those guys walk out of that tunnel on Thursday night, this is still a young team, and almost this whole team was here last year.
Yep.
These guys are going to say, hey, we walked out of this tunnel on Thanksgiving last year. These guys were in first place, and we beat
Correct.
these guys, right? So you have that psychological thing like sitting in the back of your mind that helps to block out the noise. That helps to block out those distractions because you went in there last year and pulled off the victory.
100%. A couple more minutes here. Again, he's Mike Spofford, Wes Hockwitz. Packers preview presented by Microsoft Surface. Packers, Lions, Thursday Night Football on Amazon Prime, 7:15 p.m. Central Start Time. Pam on YouTube, has Pro Bowl voting started yet? Where do you go to vote? Well, first off, you go to packers.com/Pro Bowl. Social voting begins on Monday as well, so be sure to follow the Packers platforms, and you can vote for your favorite Packers player. I believe Packers so far top 10, top 7, something like that, as far as how many votes have been casted for their players.
I believe Packers are number 7 in the league in terms of total votes.
So we can do better than that. There's time left here. But we do know Xavier McKinney is the number 1 voted for free safety in the National Football League. And, I mean, it's almost kind of crazy that he has not been to a Pro Bowl yet before. For as much as everybody respects his game even before the 7 interceptions this year, I mean, he's generated a lot of positive fervor for him in his game, but has never been to a Pro Bowl yet.
Yeah,
It looks like, at least on the fan balloting side of things, he's taken some steps towards making that first one.
Yeah, he's at the top of the list right now in the league in terms of the fan voting at free safety, and the next highest in terms of placement in the fan voting is Josh Jacobs. He is 4th in the league. Jacobs is 2nd in the NFC.
Yeah.
I believe 2nd in the NFC. In the fan voting,
Sure.
in the fan voting at running back. So those are the 2 guys right now that are getting the most votes in terms of their position.
Grover, do you think X will get another interception? Well, I'll tell you what, if you're at 7, 8 would be interesting. And you know what's funny, man? Did Woodson have 9 in a season?
Woodson had 9.
He had 9, my goodness.
And the franchise record is 10.
And that's Bobby Dillon.
No, that's Irv Comp.
Irv Comp, 1943.
1943, he was a rookie. Irv Comp had 10. I believe Bobby Dillon and Charles Woodson and a couple of other guys have had 9. Like there are a handful of guys who have had 9 in a season for the Packers, and then Irv Comp at 10 stands alone as the franchise single season record holder.
They always say Irv Comp stands alone. Tom Grossi, who I think this is fun. Tom, in addition to being the NFL reigning fan of the year and a very successful YouTube channel and social media presence, Tom probably gets the award for being the most consistent viewer of Packers preview this season. I feel like I owe him like a cheese box or something like this at this point for him doing this. Although he can't eat it. He's lactose intolerant. I can't even give him a cheese box. I'll give him something. Tom Grossi's question, though, is, hey, guys, long-time listener, first-time commenter. Tom, you should have your own segment of whether it's chaotic good or whatever. You should have a part of your YouTube channel should be long-time listener, first-time commenter. LaFleur recently said that he wished more players were more like Mike Spofford. What about Spoff's grit do you think coach is trying to emulate? Man, there's so much grit to love with Mike Spofford. I mean, we went to London.
We're just into making stuff up now, aren't we?
No, we're not. I mean, there was a lot of grit to be. When you think about guys playing through injuries, us going to London. I think you actually left the hospital after your appendicitis.
That was probably the grittiest. Yeah,
the missus drove you from the hospital to the airport for us to get on the flight to London. I mean, dude, it doesn't get any grittier than that. Like, you toughed one out there.
Yeah, I did. That was it's a little bit of an exaggeration, but
no, there's not. Oh, and then Joe said on YouTube, Grassi, it's definitely the hair. That is, the hair's got a lot of grit. Thank you, Tom. I appreciate you, man. Last couple questions. Matt, are we good? Are you good on time? You don't need to get anywhere? Okay, we'll take a couple more questions. This is from, I want to ask you this because you are the king of this stuff. We have not started Path to the Playoffs or anything like that, but Kyle Loney asked, what are the playoff implications if the Packers win or if they lose? I just want to say this because I said it on Unscripted this morning. The Packers still, it's an uphill battle to win the North. I think I said this based on the New York Times playoff generator, the percentages. It's still only like a 36% chance of winning the North if the Packers beat both the Lions and the Vikings. But they got to do their part.
Yeah.
But in terms of the actual playoff implications, Green Bay's sitting 6th right now. If the playoffs started today, they'd be 6th. They'd be going out to Seattle. A lot of things can happen in the NFC West yet.
100%.
A lot of things can happen in the NFC South.
Yeah.
But the main thing is the Packers are in very good playoff positioning with this 9-3 start, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
The main thing now is, one, obviously trying to get to 10 wins, but two, you still want to stay within reach here of Detroit, because if this is really the most powerful and dominant division in the NFL right now, might as well just be the number 1 seed too.
Yeah, as you said, if the Packers win this game in Detroit, it doesn't mean that the Packers are going to win the division. What it does mean is that the Packers would still have a chance to win the division.
Yep.
If you lose this game, you can kiss the division goodbye. I'm sorry, it's done. You're not going to be division champs, and then you're just looking at wild card scenarios only, right? So, but if the Packers can win this game, give Detroit a second loss, you have 3 losses, Minnesota has 2 losses with still a handful of games left to go for everybody, then it's game on. It's anything can happen in the North, right? But if you lose, then you're really looking just at the wild card scenarios. I think there is I'll put it at a decent chance that 10 wins gets a wild card in the NFC. I think 11 wins gets you as close to a lock of a wild card as you could probably ask for. So those are the scenarios you're looking at if you cannot come away with a victory in Detroit.
And the big reason for that, just to add this on, the teams that are in top contention now maybe Dallas claws itself back in there, but the teams that are in top contention right now that are on the bubble for the wild card are the same teams in the NFC West right now that are beating up on each other, trying to win that division as well.
And the vast majority of them have 6 losses already.
Yeah.
So for them to get to 11 wins, they have to run the table, or at least one or two of them.
Impossible for them to do that in that division.
1 or 2 of them needs to run the table to get to 11-6, which is why I would say if you're the Packers and you can't win this game, so you're out of it in the North, but looking at the wild card, then your target is 11 wins. Because if you can get to 11-6, it's as close to a mathematical lock as you could ask for, I think, to be in the playoffs.
We already did the keys to victory a little bit earlier because of the questions. This question comes from Ronald, though, on Facebook, and this is one we will sign off on. What were the Packers' main struggles the last time we played the Lions, and do you guys think these issues have been fixed and the team is ready for Thursday night?
I mean, nothing's ever fixed, but you look at the way that game started, where the Packers dug themselves a big hole against Detroit the first time. It was drop passes, it was penalties, which both of those contributed to not converting in the red zone, and then it was the big turnover at the end of the first half. It was the pick 6 that really put Detroit in command of that game. The Packers have reduced the turnovers in recent weeks. I think the drop passes have come down a little bit. The penalties is the one that is still kind of hanging out there that they need to get fixed. The red zone has definitely gotten better in the last 3 weeks. That's kind of where I see the Packers are at right now.
The Packers clean up the pre-snap penalties on both sides of the ball, whether it's lining up off sides or the false starts and some of those procedural things, illegal motion, although that hasn't been so much of an issue here. For some other teams it has been.
A little bit more of an issue for the Packers earlier in the year. They seem to have sorted that stuff out.
You get that stuff squared away, you can deal with the physical contact penalties, those things will happen. It's the procedural stuff, it's the mental stuff, the stuff that Matt LaFleur always talks about is, I don't know if he calls it the selfish penalties, but just the stuff, the concentration penalties.
Yeah, focus.
Where the
He called
focus
the
penalties.
focus penalties,
That you want to
yes,
get
absolutely.
corralled, and you cannot have those against a team the caliber of the Detroit Lions at 11-1. It is going to be a fun night at Ford Field. It does not get any better than this. If you look at some of the comments that Dan Campbell has made out in Michigan this past week, talking about the race within the NFC North, it is hot, it is exciting, and it's going to be something that is going to very much go down to the wire. He is Mike Spofford. I'm Wes Hawkowitz. We thank you, as always, for joining us on Packers Preview, brought to you by Microsoft Surface. Stay tuned to Packers.com and the Packers mobile app. Tons of stories up there already. I wrote something today on Robert Rochelle, kind of looking back at Thanksgiving. Robert, unfortunately, working through a lot of stuff personally, had two very close friends of his from his childhood pass away, were shot down in Louisiana. He persevered through that. A lot of people within the organization helping him get through that game, made a critical play at the start of that thing to kind of get things rolling against the Miami Dolphins. A very valuable member of that locker room, a very beloved member of that locker room, and somebody that, when you look at the special teams of the Green Bay Packers, I think is going to be very pivotal for them down the stretch. Also looked at the NFC North, the competition there. Mike had a 5 things story, some of the takeaways throughout the weekend and that game against the Miami Dolphins. And you will also have one last look coming up tomorrow. So stay tuned for that on Packers.com. Until next time, for Mike, I'm Wes. We'll see you later.